The human immunodeficiency virus, better known as HIV, has been at the forefront of medical discussion since the 1980s due to the lethalness surrounding the disease and the probability of never finding a cure. In more developed countries where HIV treatment has seen major advancements and clinical resources have become more widely available, the disease has transformed from one that is terminally fatal to one that is manageable as a lifelong chronic illness. However, in lower-income poverty-stricken areas where treatment options are not made readily available due to the cost and accessibility, the infectious disease continues to be a leading cause of death. According to the World Health Organization, HIV/AIDS continues to be the third leading cause of death among less developed countries, and an estimated 33.3 million people live with the disease worldwide as of today. Research suggests that a cure might be attainable in the near future, but the Obama administration believes that prevention and treatment take a higher priority in the issue. A timely response to these advances would see a shift in national policy and funding towards finding a cure, because a cure would establish the highest quality of life for citizens living with the disease in the United States. It would decrease disparities among minority groups, more so than the prevention and treatment options do so now, and it would establish the best treatment approach to viral eradication, effectually solidifying the president's legacy in the HIV issue. The administration should reconstruct the national HIV/AIDS strategy to place finding a cure for HIV as a top priority, for if this type of scientific breakthrough was achieved, it would establish the greatest quality of life for those individuals suffering from the disease at home and abroad. The Obama administration acknowledges that the HIV issue has exigency due to the deadly nature of the disease and the amount of people affected by it. Although the incidence of infection is much lower in the United States than in other countries, the president acknowledges that with over 56,000 Americans contracting the disease a year and nearly 1.8 million people dying of AIDS per year worldwide, the issue is one that demands immediate attention. According to the National HIV/AIDS Strategy, the federal implementation plan, the administration suggests that, quote, "Right now we are experiencing a domestic epidemic that demands a renewed commitment, increased public attention, and leadership." The president's stance on the issue arises from his role as a non-discriminatory leader, his aspirations to promote social equality, and his desire to provide medicinal resources to low-class citizens. In the national strategy towards addressing this epidemic, the administration establishes their main concerns. Primarily, they want to decrease the number of people living with HIV by providing more prevention methods and strategies for individuals living in high-risk areas. They also want to provide higher accessibility to care for individuals affected by the disease so that overall care and quality of life improves for these individuals. Finally, they want to decrease the disparities among different groups living with the disease currently. The overreaching goal of the plan is to decrease the incidence of HIV through prevention, education, and better treatment options. Delegating funding towards prevention and treatment is seen as an obligation in order to respect the dignity of infected individuals. Proposing that the treatment and prevention funding should be severely diminished is not a humanitarian approach and is not the notion being proposed. Simply, more funding should be placed into research for a cure. With recent advancements in the field of HIV research, it is not too bold to propose that a cure is obtainable in the near future. Completely eradicating the virus through a cure will not only decrease the number of individuals living with the deadly disease, but essentially eliminate all cases of occurrence if the appropriate treatment or vaccine becomes available. In his research outlined in the article, Hematopoietic Cell Transplantation with Cord Blood for Cure of HIV Infections, Lawrence Peets proposes that hematopoietic cell transplantation has been proven effective in curing an infected individual. Although the breakthrough was substantial in that it was the first documented case of curing an adult diagnosed with HIV, the research is still in its early stages. Therefore, implementing the procedure in all cases of HIV would not be feasible at this point in time. The research, which was published in July of 2012, proposed that the specificity of the donor and recipient match in hematopoietic cells would make the procedure difficult to perform except in rare cases. However, it was a major advancement that offered the first prospects of obtaining an HIV cure. Another breakthrough for the disease occurred in March 2013 when scientists discovered an infant was cured of the HIV infection after taking an intensive and early regimen of antiretroviral drugs. Antiretroviral drugs work by significantly reducing the viral load in the body, but haven't been proven to completely eradicate it. The infant was tested for the virus 6, 12, and 20 days after birth, and the conclusion of each test confirmed HIV to be present in the blood after each time. For reasons unknown to scientists, the child did not come back for a checkup for 18 months, and the identification of the virus and any HIV antibodies was completely identifiable. Although the scientific discovery did not stem from any scientific research currently being held, it offers a promising inlet to future research in preventing the transmission of the virus. If this intensive regimen can be repeated in newborns and adults that have been given an early diagnosis of the infection, then progress can be made to completely eradicating the virus and implementing the cure. The administration's concern of being able to decrease the incidence of HIV and promote the greatest well-being for the individuals infected is a humanitarian approach. However, the national strategy towards obtaining this goal is almost 3 years old and doesn't consider the advancements in research that suggest a cure is attainable. With that being said, current treatment options are quite expensive and need to be maintained in order to keep the viral load under control. According to a report from NPR, the costs associated with HIV treatments can range from $2,000 to $5,000 a month. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention claim that around half the people in the United States diagnosed with the disease don't receive regular health care, so transmission of the virus becomes much more problematic. In the group that does receive treatment, 42% of the individuals that comprise the group receive Medicaid, and 24% are uninsured. The uninsured receive health care services through the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, which is federally funded through the National HIV/AIDS Strategy. For the half of diagnosed citizens that choose to forgo treatment, cost is a contributing factor. However, the side effects associated with the treatment are another reason why some choose not to undergo treatment. Some side effects associated with HIV treatment are fatigue, anemia, dizziness, headaches, diarrhea, insomnia, and injection site reactions. Since only half of the diagnosed citizens actually benefit from the treatment, and some choose to forgo treatment for various reasons, the current strategy is not successfully achieving its goal. Additionally, changing the national strategy so more focus is placed on finding a cure will decrease disparities among minority groups more than the prevention and treatment strategies do at the current time. Individuals are considered a disparity population if, quote, there is a significant disproportion in the overall rate of disease, incidence, prevalence, morbidity, mortality, or survival rates in the population as compared to the health status of the general population. The administration aimed to decrease disparities by refocusing the prevention efforts to target specific high-risk communities and make care options more accessible in these areas. The incidence of HIV was the highest in Black male population, as well as gay, bisexual, and heterosexual populations. The CDC announced that the gay and bisexual men were 40 to 86 times more likely to become infected with HIV than heterosexual males. An indicator of the extent and severity of the viral infection is determined by viral load. A person is considered to have a high viral load when the virus has replicated to between 5,000 and 10,000 copies per milliliter of blood. The administration notes that, quote, addressing the ongoing stigma and discrimination is perhaps the biggest challenge we face, as it is not about what government does as much as it is about changing the hearts and minds among members of the public, end quote. The public view on certain civil rights issues continues to adapt and change, as demonstrated by the progress made for gay marriage within the past few years. The initial reaction to the HIV epidemic was one of disgust and fear because the disease was not well known in the public realm. The president strives to promote social equality in various areas of his domestic policy, and that is why he upholds a fundamental goal to decrease disparities among various social groups in the National HIV/AIDS Strategy. If an effective cure was obtainable in the future by investing more funding into research for an HIV cure, the president's goal towards decreasing disparities among various minority groups would be much more extensive than the current strategy hopes to achieve. The disparities that the Obama administration hopes to address are due to the inaccessibility to diagnosis and treatment methods in certain high-risk areas. However, the administration does not acknowledge that the high incidence in particular groups are caused from high-risk behaviors that these groups participate in. Without undermining the goals set forth by the national strategy to decrease disparities among certain minority groups, a case might be made that certain HIV incidents can be avoided if safe behaviors are practiced. If members of these groups were educated on the importance of practicing abstinence or having appropriate testing done before having a new sexual partner, the incidence of the disease would automatically decline. Prevention strategies outlined under the national strategy are not showing a decline in the number of HIV infection anyways. In certain high-risk groups, the incidence has increased by more than 15%, wherein other high-risk groups, the incidence has remained relatively stable. However, there is no decline in the incidence of HIV among these various at-risk groups. This just shows that the $6.42 billion allocated in 2013 to fight the HIV/AIDS epidemic is not addressing the concerns of the administration outlined in the national strategy. However, if a cure for HIV were obtainable, the issue of being able to implement effective prevention and treatment strategies in certain groups would be unnecessary. Once the cure was out on the market and costs associated with it became more affordable, the disparities across different groups would effectively be eliminated. Finally, the President should change the national strategy so that research into a cure is a higher priority in the HIV issue, because doing so will establish the best treatment approach to viral eradication and effectually solidify the President's legacy in the HIV issue. The President alludes to the fact that over half of Americans know someone who is affected by HIV. If President Obama's administration is deemed partially responsible for the cure and eradication of the HIV virus, then his approval ratings will rise dramatically due to this high affiliation in the issue. In a presidential address on World AIDS Day in 2011, the President addressed the HIV/AIDS issue by making the following remark, quote, "Few could have imagined that we'd be talking about the real possibility of an AIDS-free generation, but that's what we're talking about. Make no mistake, we're going to win this fight. But the fight is not over, not by a long shot, not for the 1.2 million Americans who are living with HIV right now, not for the Americans who are infected every day. This fight is not over for them, it's not over for their families, and it certainly isn't over for your president. The only possibility of becoming an AIDS-free generation would be to establish a cure. Increased prevention and better treatment can help reduce HIV incidence if implemented correctly. However, with over half of infected individuals not receiving treatment for the disease, progress towards obtaining this goal is slow. The President points out in the HIV/AIDS national strategy that the duty of the administration is to ensure that laws and policies support the current understanding of the best public health practices for preventing and treating HIV. However, since the strategy was outlined in 2010, current health practices have advanced and now leading scientists believe a cure is obtainable. Current prevention and treatment programs are costly and haven't seen much success. Therefore, the accountability within the government makes the program seem less credible. However, if the President objected to place more funding into research for a cure, the praise for such an action would be considered heroic if a cure was found. The strategic approach of the HIV issue should be geared more towards finding a cure over prevention and treatment options. If a cure was found, it would promote the greatest well-being in HIV patients, it would decrease disparities, and would solidify a legacy for the President. Recent experimental findings suggest that a cure is attainable from research conducted within the past year. The National HIV/AIDS Strategy, which proposed more than 3 years ago, does not consider the current advances in the field of HIV research. Additionally, the current treatment options outlined by the administration are costly and not being utilized effectively today. It has been suggested that prevention strategies are failing to show a decrease in the number of HIV infections. Therefore, in order to establish the greatest well-being for citizens living with the disease, decrease disparities among infected groups, and cement the President's legacy on the issue, it is important to shift the focus to an HIV cure.